this that truly makes a difference in your life, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And comment below, what area of your life is most overwhelming right now? It can be a simple comment, but it will make you reflect. Now, back to the video. Chapter 1. The Overburdened Executive. Jonah was 40 years old and by conventional standards had succeeded in life, a marketing executive at a tech company, 6-figure salary, 200 square meter apartment in an upscale neighborhood, 3 cars in the garage, because he needed one for every occasion, right? A closet full of clothes with tags still attached, a smartwatch that monitored everything, a smart TV in every room, smart light bulbs, smart locks. Even the refrigerator was smart. Ironically, Jonah felt stupid. Every morning, even before getting out of bed, he would check various notifications on his cell phone, work emails at 6:23 a.m., messages from family groups that he never had time to read properly, offers for products he didn't even know existed but that suddenly seemed essential. He would wake up tired, always tired. That kind of tiredness that doesn't go away even after 8 hours of sleep, because it wasn't physical tiredness. It was cognitive exhaustion. The closet was overflowing. Every morning was an agonizing decision. What to wear? What if he needed to go straight to happy hour after work? Better bring an extra change of clothes and a spare pair of sneakers. And breakfast? He had 6 types of granola, 4 brands of imported coffee, 3 types of plant-based milk, but he never knew what to eat. Choice paralysis. In the end, I always ended up grabbing whatever was available on the run and eating it in traffic. The traffic. Oh, the traffic. An hour and a half to travel 15 kilometers. Horns blaring, screeching brakes, people cutting him off, him cursing back, podcasts on his headphones, terrible news on the radio, emails being answered at red lights. When he arrived at the office, already at 9:30 a.m., late as always, Jonah went into autopilot mode. Meetings, spreadsheets, more meetings, phone calls, impossible deadlines, people demanding results, him demanding results from his team, and every few minutes that irresistible urge to check my phone, Instagram, LinkedIn, news, as if something very important could have happened in the last 3 minutes. Lunch? Fast food in front of the computer, without savoring it, without noticing, just swallowing while answering emails. In the afternoon, the energy plummeted. More coffee, a chocolate bar, anything to keep going. When he finally got home, usually after 9 p.m., Jonah could barely hold a coherent conversation. He'd turn on the TV, scroll through Instagram, and somehow, without even realizing it, it was already midnight, and he was buying things on Amazon that he didn't even need. A magnetic organizer for kitchen knives, he never cooked. A premium toolkit, he never fixed anything. An online photography course that would forever remain at 2% completion. Buying gave a momentary feeling of control, as if each new object would fill the void he felt. But what about the next day? The boxes were still piled up in the corner of the room, and the emptiness was still there. Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. It was on an ordinary Tuesday that everything began to change. Jonah was late, again, for an important meeting. He was searching for his car keys amidst the mess on the entryway desk. 2 car keys he no longer used, 3 unfamiliar flash drives, batteries, business cards from people he couldn't remember, 6 remote controls for devices he wasn't even sure still worked. And then, while rummaging through that chaotic drawer, something snapped inside him. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears or breakdown. It was something more subtle and more frightening. He simply didn't recognize his own life. She looked around the apartment. Really looked. For the first time in months. Shelves overflowing with books he would never read. Gym equipment turned into coat racks. Collections of things he couldn't even remember why he'd started collecting. An entire shelf dedicated to tech gadgets that had been essential for 2 weeks and then forgotten. At that moment, a question flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning. Do I possess these things, or do these things possess me? He cancelled the meeting. He called in sick to work, and he wasn't lying, not really. There was something wrong there, it just wasn't physical. Jonah spent the entire day sitting on the apartment sofa, just observing, trying to remember the last time he had felt truly light, truly at peace. He couldn't remember. That night, While absent-mindedly scrolling through Instagram, some habits are hard to break, he saw a post from an interior designer he followed. It was about Japandai style, a blend of Japanese minimalism with Scandinavian design. And in the middle of the post there was a photo of a ceramic piece, simple, elegant, intentionally imperfect, and something about that image deeply touched him. Without much thought, Jonah decided he was going to buy an authentic Japanese piece to decorate the apartment, something that would bring that serenity he saw in the photo. It's funny how life works, isn't it? He was still trying to solve the problem by buying things. He still hadn't understood the lesson, but sometimes the cure comes disguised as the disease. Chapter 3. The Craftsman. After searching online, Jonah discovered that there was a traditional Japanese craftsman living on the outskirts of the city. A man named Daisuke, who had moved to the United States 15 years ago and maintained a small workshop where she created ceramics, using centuries-old techniques. The following Saturday, Jonah drove there. The address was on a quiet, tree-lined street, far from the chaos of downtown. When he arrived, he almost thought he had gone to the wrong place. It wasn't a shop. It was a small, simple house with a tiny but impeccably cared-for garden. Stones arranged with intention, a bamboo swaying gently, an atmosphere of calm, deliberate. Jonah rang the doorbell. The door opened and a Japanese man of about 60 years old with grey hair smiled gently. "You must be Jonah. Please come in." Daisuke's voice was soft but firm, the kind of voice of someone who is in no hurry. Jonah walked in and immediately felt the difference. It wasn't just the house. It was as if he had left a noisy avenue and entered a silent forest. The room was almost empty. A tatami mat on the floor, a low wooden table, a single painting on the wall, simple brushstrokes of a mountain and a circle that could be the moon or the sun, a small bookcase with perhaps 20 books, carefully arranged, and nothing more. No TV, no excessive decoration, no noise, visual. "Please sit down," said Daisuke, pointing to a cushion on the floor near the table. Jonah sat down, feeling a little uncomfortable. He wasn't used to so much silence. "You came looking for pottery," said Daisuke, pouring tea into 2 small, delicate cups. "But what are you really looking for?" The question caught Jonah off guard. I saw some of your work online and I thought it was beautiful. I wanted something to decorate my apartment with." Daisuke smiled. It wasn't a condescending smile. It was kind, understanding. "Let me show you the workshop." Chapter 4. The Workshop of the 3 Tools. They walked through a small hallway and arrived at the workshop at the back of the house. Jonah expected to find, well, he wasn't exactly sure. Modern equipment, shelves full of materials, something more elaborate. What he saw confused him. The workshop was smaller than his closet. There was a potter's wheel, an old wooden one operated by a pedal, a simple workbench with 3 tools hanging from it, a bamboo knife, a natural sponge, and a thin wire. That's all. "Is that all?" Jonah asked before he could stop himself. Daisuke picked up a piece of damp clay and sat down in front of the wheel. "To that, do you know that word?" he said calmly. Jonah shook his head. "It means dignified poverty or honest frugality. But it's not about being poor. It's about choosing simplicity as a form of mental discipline." Daisuke began working with the clay. His movements were precise, economical, not a single wasted gesture. The wheel turned at a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. "When I was young in Japan," Daisuke continued, without taking his eyes off the piece, "I worked for a large industrial ceramics company. We had very expensive machines, dozens of specialized tools, computers that controlled every detail of production." He paused, gently shaping the side of the piece. "We were producing 1,000 pieces a day, and I was unhappy. Completely unhappy." "Why?" Jonah asked, genuinely curious. "Because I had forgotten. Because I was creating. Each new tool, each new process, each new technology. All of that stood between me and the clay, between me and the true purpose of my work." Daisuke picked up the bamboo knife and made a precise cut along the edge of the piece. "One day my master, an 80-year-old man who still created pieces by hand, told me something that changed my life. He said, "Daisuke-san, you don't need 100 tools. You need 3 tools and 100 hours of practice." Jonah looked at the 3 tools on the wall. "And you? Only use those 3. These 3, Daisuke confirmed, and my hands, and this wheel that's almost 100 years old." He took the damp sponge and smoothed the surface of the piece with circular motions. "Do you know what happened when I simplified? When I eliminated everything that was unnecessary?" "What?" "I started to see again, feeling again. Each piece I create now has soul, has intention, because there is nothing between me and the creation. No distractions, no excesses, only the essential." Daisuke used the wire to separate the piece from the wheel. It was a simple bowl, elegant, imperfect in a deliberate way, the slightly irregular rim, the texture of the clay still visible. But there was something about it, something presence which mass-produced items never have. "That's Seihin," Daisuke said, carefully placing the bowl on a shelf to dry. "It's not about having less because you're poor. It's about choose less to have more clarity." Chapter 5. The Lesson of the Mind. Daisuke prepared more tea and the two returned to the living room. "Let me tell you something about the human brain," Daisuke said, and Jonah was surprised by the change of subject. "You think I only know about ceramics, right?" Jonah smiled awkwardly. "I read a lot," Daisuke continued, "and one of the things I've learned is that our brains have a limited capacity for attention. Scientists call it cognitive load." He pointed to the empty room around them. "Every object in your field of vision consumes a little bit of your attention. Every choice you have to make, even small choices like which pen to use, consumes a little bit of your mental energy." Jonah thought about his crowded apartment, the chaotic drawers, the impossible closet. "There's a researcher named Barry Schwartz who wrote about this," Daisuke continued. "He calls it the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to decide, and the more unhappy you become with the decision you made, because you're always thinking, what if I had chosen differently?" That was exactly how Jonah felt every day. "Zen monks have always known this," Daisuke said. "That's why they live with almost nothing. It's not because they're poor. It's because they understand that external simplicity creates internal clarity." He paused, taking a sip of tea. "There is another concept related to Seihin. It's called Mushinan empty mind, or a mind free from distractions. It's the mental state the samurai sought, a clear, focused mind, without noise." "And how do you get to this state?" Jonah asked. "Eliminating the unnecessary, externally and internally." Daisuke stood up and went to the small bookshelf. He pulled out an old notebook and returned. "When I moved into this house 10 years ago, I had 3 rooms full of stuff. Books, tools, clothes, gifts I'd received and never used, unfinished projects." He opened the notebook. There were handwritten lists inside. "I spent 6 months doing an exercise. Every day I would choose an area of the house and ask myself, is this essential? Does this serve my purpose? Does this bring me real joy or just the illusion of security?" And what did you find out? That 90% of my possessions were dead weight. Things I kept just in case. Things I bought to feel better for a few minutes. Things I thought defined me, but that actually only distracted me from who I really was. Jonah felt something tighten in his chest. Recognition. "I donated, sold, or threw away almost everything. It was painful at first. Every object seemed important. But you know what happened next?" "What?" "I started breathing again." Chapter 6. Seed Planted. Jonah left Daisuke's house that day without buying any pottery, but he took something far more valuable, a sense of unease, a seed that had been planted. In the following days, he couldn't stop thinking about Daisuke's words. He began to pay attention to how he felt when he entered the apartment after work. Anxious, suffocated, oppressed. It wasn't the apartment itself, it was the amount of things, the excess, the constant visual noise competing for your attention. The following weekend, Jonah made a decision. He grabbed 3 large boxes and started with the closet. The first rule he set for himself was simple: If I haven't used it in the last 3 months, it's going away. It was brutal and liberating. Designer shirts he never wore because they were too nice for everyday wear. Donation box. Pants that no longer fit, but that he kept in case he lost weight. Donation box. Uncomfortable shoes he had bought just because they were on sale. Donation box. In the end, the closet that had 80 pieces of clothing was left with 25. And do you know what happened the following Monday? Jonah dressed in 2 minutes. No anxiety, no second choice, no more feeling of always wearing the wrong clothes. It was so impactful that he continued. The kitchen. He had 3 stand mixers. 3. 6 pots he never used. Dozens of plastic containers without lids. Kitchen gadgets he'd seen on TV shows and bought on impulse. He kept the essentials. A good pot, a good frying pan. Basic, quality utensils. The room. The shelves full of trinkets. Work awards that meant nothing. Decorations he bought because something was missing there. He removed almost everything. He left only a few pieces that he really liked. The apartment started to breathe. There was space. There was visual silence. And something surprising happened in Jonah's mind. He began to feel lighter, not just physically, mentally, as if each object that left the apartment freed up a little bit of space in his brain. Chapter 7. The Depth of Practice. 3 months later, Jonah returned to Daisuke's house. This time he didn't go as a consumer, he went as a student. "I did what you suggested," Jonah said as soon as he entered. "I simplified my apartment, and it worked. I feel different." Daisuke smiled. "I'm glad. But tell me one thing, did you simply throw things away, or did you reflected? Why had he accumulated all that?" The question caught Jonah off guard. "I threw it away." "Why?" "Because Seihin isn't just about having fewer things. It's about understanding why you seek excess in the first place." They sat down again in the minimalist room. "Let me ask you something," Daisuke said. "Why do you buy so much?" Jonah was silent for a moment. I don't know. It makes me feel good, I guess. For a while. For a while." "And then what?" Daisuke repeated, emphasizing the point. "Then I feel empty again. And then I buy something else." Exactly, you're using consumption as emotional anesthesia. You're not buying objects. You're trying to buy peace of mind. This hit Jonah like a punch in the gut, because it was true. "There's a phrase I really like," Daisuke said. "When you realize you don't need anything, you have everything you need." He served tea again. True Seihin goes beyond material simplicity. It is a mental discipline. It's about training your brain to find sufficiency in what you already have, to not seek validation in possessions, to not measure your worth by the amount of things you can buy. "And how do you do that?" Jonah asked. "Practicing mindfulness, zanshin, a relaxed yet alert state of consciousness. You are fully focused on the present moment, on the task at hand." Daisuke pointed to the window where the small garden was visible. "When I tend to the garden, I tend to the garden. I'm not thinking about bills, projects, or worries. I'm there, with my hands in the soil, feeling the texture, seeing the colors, hearing the sounds." "This seems impossible to me," Jonah admitted. "My mind is always racing." "Because you fuel this acceleration, constant notifications, multitasking, perpetual consumption of information and entertainment. Your brain is addicted to stimuli." Daisuke picked up his cell phone. A simple, old model. "I have a phone, but I don't have social media. I don't receive notifications. I don't read the news all the time. And you know what I gain from that? What? Time to think, time to process, time to simply exist without constantly reacting to something." Chapter 8. Daily Practice. In the following months, Jonah began applying Seihin to other areas of his life. He reduced the number of social commitments. He stopped saying yes to every event, every happy hour, every meeting. He learned that no, it's a complete sentence. His calendar, which had previously been overflowing with appointments, began to have blank spaces. And in those spaces, he discovered something he had forgotten existed: productive boredom. moments when nothing urgent was happening, when he could simply sit and think, read a book from beginning to end without interruptions, cook a real meal, paying attention to each step. He established a personal rule, one in, one out. If he bought something new, something old had to go. This forced him to question whether he really needed that new item. Most of the time, the answer was no. He also began practicing what Daisuke called digital fasting. An hour before bed, no screens, no emails, no social media. The first few nights were terrible. He didn't know what to do with his own hands. He paced the house like a recovering addict, which, in a way, was exactly what he was. But after 2 weeks, something changed. He started sleeping better. His mind, which used to race late into the night, began to slow down naturally. He woke up rested for the first time in years. At work, he applied the same principle. He closed 15 tabs that were permanently open in his browser. He uninstalled apps that he compulsively checked. He set specific times to check emails, 3 times a day, no more. His colleagues found it strange at first. "How are you managing to do everything without always being online?" they asked. The answer was simple. He wasn't doing everything. He was doing the what did it matter and doing it well. His productivity, ironically, increased because he was no longer in constant reaction mode, jumping from task to task. He would choose one thing, focus completely on it, finish it, and then move on to the next. Zanshin, full attention. Chapter 9. The Deepest Lesson. 6 months after their first meeting, Jonah and Daisuke had become friends. Jonah visited the workshop regularly. Sometimes he helped Daisuke with small tasks. Sometimes he would just sit and watch the master work at the potter's wheel. There was something meditative about it. The silence, the steady rhythm, the total attention. One day, Daisuke asked, "Did you notice that all my pieces have imperfections?" Jonah looked at the bowls and plates on the shelf. It was true. None of them were perfectly symmetrical. Some had slight irregularities in texture. Others had subtle variations in color. "Yes, I noticed. Is it intentional?" "Absolutely. There's a concept called wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence. It is related to Seihin." Daisuke picked up a bowl with a small crack. When Westerners see a crack, they see a defect, something that needs to be hidden or fixed. In Japan, we have a technique called kintsugi, repairing broken ceramics with gold. Gold? Why? Because the crack is part of the object's history. Instead of pretending it never broke, we celebrate the fracture. We make it visible, beautiful. The piece becomes more valuable because of imperfection, not despite it. Jonah remained silent, processing. "Seihin is similar," Daisuke continued. "It's not about creating a perfectly minimalist life where you have nothing and live like a monk. It's about accept enough." He put the bowl back. "You're going to make mistakes. You're going to buy unnecessary things sometimes. You're going to get distracted. You're going to fall back into old patterns. And that's okay. The important thing is to keep coming back. Always come back to practice." "That reminds me of something," Jonah said. "I've realized that the fewer things I have, the more I value what I do have. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. When you have 80 shirts, none of them are special. When you have 8 shirts that you truly love, each one matters. You take better care of them, you appreciate them more. Daisuke smiled. This applies to everything. Friends, commitments, even information. The less you consume, the more you absorb. Jonah thought about how he used to read dozens of articles a day, but he remembered almost nothing. Now he read less, but really processed what I was reading. "There's one last concept I want to teach you," Daisuke said. "Ichigo ichi." Once a date. The idea that each moment is unique and will never be repeated exactly the same way. How does this relate to simplicity? Because when you're overwhelmed, rushing, distracted, you miss moments. They pass by and you don't even notice. But when you simplify, when you create space, you're able to be present. Present, and then every moment becomes precious. Chapter 10. The Legacy. Today, 2 years after that first meeting, Jonah's apartment is unrecognizable, not because he spent a fortune on renovations, but because he removed everything that was unnecessary. The room has a comfortable sofa, a wooden table, a bookshelf with his favorite books. Not all the books he bought, but the ones that truly mean something to him. And on the table, a single piece of ceramic, a bowl made by Daisuke. Simple, elegant, with small imperfections that make it unique. Jonah no longer has 3 cars, he has one, which he actually uses and takes care of. His closet is no longer overflowing. He has 20 pieces of clothing that he loves and wears regularly. No more streaming subscriptions I never watched, apps I never opened, or products that were forgotten in drawers. He has less. And that's why he has more mental clarity, more energy, more time, more peace. He still works at the same company, but now he gets home at 6 p.m. because he learned to focus on what's essential and say no to what's superfluous. He still has a smartphone, but without social media, without constant notifications, without the compulsion to check it every 3 minutes. He still buys things. But now, he thinks beforehand. He asks, do I need this? Does it serve my purpose? Will it bring me real value or just momentary satisfaction? Most of the time, he leaves the item on the shelf. And do you know what the most surprising result of all this was? Jonah saved more money in the last 2 years than in the previous 10, because he stopped spending on things he didn't need to impress people who didn't care. He uses that money for experiences, meaningful trips, dinners with close friends, pottery classes with Daisuke, because he's discovered that creating something with his own hands brings a satisfaction that no purchased product ever could. So let's recap what we learned from Jonah's story. First, Seihin is not about poverty. It's about the mental discipline of choosing simplicity in a world that constantly pushes us towards excess. Second, every object you own, every appointment on your calendar, every notification on your phone consumes a little bit of your mental energy. External simplicity creates internal clarity. Third, the paradox of choice is real. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to decide and the less satisfied you are with your decisions. Fourth, consumption is often emotional anesthesia. We're not buying objects, we're trying to buy peace of mind, and that never works in the long run. Fifth, Zanshin, total attention to the present moment. It is the antidote, a man who almost drowned trying to save everyone around him, until the day he discovered that sometimes letting go of someone's hand is the only way to save yourself. His name is Peyton, and this story might change the way you see your relationships. Before I continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment if you've ever been in a situation where you put in too much effort for someone who didn't appreciate it. Thank you very much for your attention, everyone. Now, going back to Peyton's story. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Wanted to Save the World. Peyton was 22 years old and believed he could save everyone. He wasn't naive, he just cared too much. You know that type of person who sees someone suffering and can't just walk by? That was him. It always was. Peyton lived in a small town in the American Midwest. He worked at a local market, earning just enough to survive, but he dreamed big. He wanted to build something. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to change his life. The problem? Nobody around him wanted the same thing. He had been in a relationship with Ava for 5 years. They met in school when they were 17, that typical teenage love that turns adult without anyone noticing. She was beautiful, fun, popular. And Peyton? Peyton was the devoted boyfriend who would do anything for her. But Ava didn't share Peyton's dreams. While he spent his nights reading business books and watching motivational speeches, she was out with her friends. While he saved every penny thinking about the future, she spent it all on clothes and parties thinking about the weekend. And Peyton's friends, same thing. Every time he tried to talk about entrepreneurship, about studying, about building something, they laughed. They called him a goody two-shoes, a boring guy. The guy who thinks he's better than everyone else. Relax, Peyton, we're young, man, stop being so serious. But Peyton couldn't relax, because he could see it. He could see that if he continued down that path in 10 years, he would be in the same place. Same job, same life, same frustration. And the worst part? He felt guilty for wanting more, as if wanting to grow was a betrayal. as if dreaming big was arrogance. Because the truth is this: when you start to grow, the people around you will try to pull you back down, not out of malice, but because your growth exposes their stagnation, and that hurts. Chapter 2: The Compulsive Savior. Peyton had developed a dangerous pattern. He tried to save everyone. When Ava said she was bored with life, Peyton would buy her self-help books. She would leave them on the shelf unopened. When friends complained about not having money, Peyton tried to convince them to study, take online courses, or start their own businesses. They would always change the subject. When he saw someone drinking excessively every week, Peyton would suggest that the person stop, that they take care of their health. The person would laugh in his face. And every time this happened, Peyton felt a mixture of frustration and guilt. Frustration because he couldn't help. Guilt because he felt he wasn't doing enough. If I try harder, maybe they'll understand. If I'm more patient, maybe they'll change. If I give more examples, maybe they'll wake up. But they wouldn't wake up. They never woke up. And do you know why? Because you can't want to change another person's life more than that person wants to change it themselves. Peyton was throwing gold coins to cats and destroying himself in the process. One day, Ava said something that affected him. "Peyton, you care more about me than I care about myself, and that's suffocating." He was shocked. How could it be suffocating? He only wanted the best for her. He only wanted her to grow, to see her own potential. But there was the problem. Peyton was trying to force a transformation that Ava didn't want. He was trying to save someone who didn't ask to be saved. And the worst part? He was doing it at the cost of his own life. Because while he spent his energy trying to convince others to change, he himself wasn't changing. He was stuck. He was stagnant. He was sinking along with those he was trying to save. Chapter 3: The Lecture That Changed Everything. One Wednesday evening, Peyton saw an advertisement for a personal development lecture. The topic was how to build discipline and sustainable habits. He invited Ava. She said she had plans to go out with her friends. He invited his friends over. They said it was coach talk. Peyton went alone. The lecture was in a small auditorium, about 50 people. The speaker was a woman of about 45 with gray hair and a serene demeanor. She didn't seem like a motivational coach. She seemed more like a philosophy professor. Her name was Dr. Sarah Nakamura, Japanese-American, psychologist specializing in behavioral change. She began the lecture with a question. How many of you here have ever tried to help someone who didn't want to be helped? Half the room raised their hands. Peyton did too. And how many of you felt guilty when that person didn't change? The same half kept their hand raised. Dr. Sarah smiled. Are you familiar with the Japanese proverb Neiko ni Koban? Silence? It means giving gold coins to a cat. It's the equivalent of our casting pearls before swine. The idea is simple. If you offer something valuable to someone who can't recognize its value, you've wasted your offer. She paused. She let it penetrate. But here's the detail that most people don't understand. The problem isn't the cat. The cat is just a cat. The problem is you, who insist on giving gold coins to someone who didn't ask for them, doesn't need them, and doesn't want them. Peyton felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Dr. Sarah continued, We human beings have a deep need for belonging. We need to be accepted by the group, the tribe, the pack. This is ingrained in our DNA from the time of the caves. Being expelled from the group was a death sentence. And that's why most of you are here today. Because you want to grow, but you're afraid of being rejected. You're afraid that if you change, you'll lose the people you love. So you try to take everyone with you. You try to save everyone, and you destroy yourselves in the process. But let me tell you a hard truth. Sometimes you have to choose between growing up and belonging. Chapter 4: The Lesson of Ma and Motainai. Dr. Sarah explained two concepts that Peyton had never heard of before. The first is Ma. It's the Japanese concept of empty space, of interval, of pause. In Japanese culture, the silence between musical notes is as important as the notes themselves. The empty space in a painting is as important as the brush strokes. When we apply Ma to relationships, we understand that knowing when to back off is just as important as knowing when to act. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone is nothing. It's giving them space. It's letting them deal with the consequences. Peyton thought of all the times he had insisted, pushed, forced. He had never given her space. He had never backed down. The second concept is motenai. It's about waste, but not waste of objects, waste of vital energy, of potential, of time. Every time you spend your energy trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved, you are practicing motenai. You are wasting your life. Dr. Sarah looked directly at Peyton. It was as if she knew. Imagine you have a bucket of water, and there are several people around you. Some are thirsty, others are not. Are you going to pour water into the mouths of those who don't want to drink? Are you going to waste all your water trying to force someone to hydrate? Either you give water to those who are thirsty and keep the rest for yourself. That broke something inside Peyton, because he had spent years pouring water down the throats of those who didn't want to drink, and he was dying of thirst. Chapter 5. The Hardest Decision. After the lecture, Peyton sat in the empty auditorium for almost an hour. He thought of Ava, of their 5-year relationship, of all the times he tried to inspire her, motivate her, help her grow, and of all the times she made it clear she didn't want that. He thought of his friends, of years of friendship, of all the conversations about dreams, about building something, about changing their lives, and of all the laughter, all the relax, Peyton, all the you think too highly of yourself. And for the first time, Peyton understood something. He wasn't being kind. He was being codependent. He wasn't helping. He was sabotaging himself. Because while he spent his energy trying to save those who didn't want to be saved, he wasn't building his own life. He was trapped in a vicious cycle where the need to be accepted was greater than the need to grow. And this had to end. That night, Peyton made the hardest decision of his life. He was going to stop throwing gold coins to cats. He was going to set boundaries. He was going to protect his energy. He was going to choose to grow, even if it meant growing alone. But he didn't know that this decision would cost him everything. Chapter 6. The Breakup. Peyton arranged to meet Ava at a cafe. He was nervous but determined. "Ava, we need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. You want me to read another self-help book?" "No. I want to end it." Silence. "What do you mean, end?" I spent 5 years trying to inspire you to grow with me, and you made it clear that you don't want that. And that's okay. You have the right to live your life the way you want. But I also have the right to live mine." Ava blushed. "So you're dumping me because I'm not good enough for you? Because I'm not obsessed with success like you? It's not about being good enough. It's about wanting different things, and about me finally understanding that I can't want more of your life than you want for yourself. You're arrogant, Peyton. You always have been." He took a deep breath. "Perhaps you're right, but I'd rather be called arrogant and grow than be called humble and remain stagnant." Ava got up and left. She didn't look back. Peyton felt his chest tighten. 5 years of history, 5 years of memories, and it ended in a 10-minute conversation, but he sensed something different. Relief. Chapter 7. The Loneliness of Growing Up. The following months were the most difficult of Peyton's life. He distanced himself from his friends. He didn't fight with anyone. He just stopped showing up. He stopped replying to messages about parties, about drinking, about enjoying life. At first, they would call, "Hey Peyton, how's it going? You've been gone for a while." He replied politely, "I'm fine, just focused on other things right now." "Dude, you've changed. You're too serious. Go back to being the old Peyton." But Peyton didn't want to go back to being who he was before, because who he was before was trapped. He was stagnant. He was sabotaging himself to please people who didn't care. His friends stopped calling, and Peyton was left alone. He woke up early. He studied, he worked, he trained, he went home, he read, he slept, he repeated. There were no more weekend outings, no more late-night conversations. There was no one left. And that hurt. It hurt a lot. Because the human brain interprets loneliness as a threat, and it screams, "Go back to the group, you're going to die alone, you need to be accepted." But Peyton had learned something from Dr. Sarah's lecture. Sometimes you have to choose between growing up and belonging. And those who choose to grow up alone at first. So he endured it. He endured the loneliness. He endured the pitying glances from his family. He endured the malicious comments that reached him. Peyton is getting too big for his britches. He abandoned everyone. But he hadn't abandoned anyone. He had only stopped sinking while trying to save those who didn't want to be saved, and gradually something began to happen. Without the distractions, without the drama, without wasting energy trying to save everyone, Peyton began to grow. He took an online course in digital marketing, then another in sales, then another in business management. He started a small consulting business. In the beginning, it yielded almost nothing, but he persevered. Every day, a small step. He trained 4 days a week. He lost 15 kilos. He gained muscle. He gained energy. He read 2 books a month: philosophy, psychology, business biographies. His mind expanded in a way he never imagined. And most importantly, he stopped feeling guilty. Because the guilt he felt before wasn't because he was wrong. It was because he was right. And the people around him didn't like that. 2 years after his breakup with Ava, Peyton had built a business that generated 6 figures a year. He had moved to a bigger city. He had met new people, people who were growing, studying, building. He had become who he always wanted to be, not because he tried to change everyone, but because he stopped destroying himself trying to help. Chapter 8. The Reunion. 3 years after the breakup, Peyton was in a coffee shop when he saw Ava. She was different, older of course, but it wasn't just that. She seemed tired. She had that look of someone who isn't happy with their own life. She saw him. She hesitated. She came over to his table. "Hi, Peyton." "Hi, Ava. How are you?" "Well, I guess so. And you?" "I'm great." She sat down uninvited. I saw your social media. I saw that you're doing well, that you've built something." "I built." Uncomfortable silence. "Peyton, I wanted to apologize for not supporting you, for laughing at your dreams, for calling you arrogant when all you wanted was to grow." Peyton took a deep breath. "Ava, you don't need to apologize. You were just living the life you wanted to live, and I was trying to force you to live mine. But you were right. I wasted those years. I'm still in the same place, same friends, same parties, same empty life. And what are you going to do about it?" She looked at him with that expression Peyton knew so well, that "save me" look. And for the first time, Peyton didn't feel the urge to save. "Ava, I've spent 5 years trying to inspire you to change, and you didn't want to, and that's okay. But I can't do that again. You need to want it for yourself, not for me, not for anyone, for you. But how? How do I start?" "Just like I started. You stop waiting for someone to save you, and you save yourself." Ava started to cry. "I don't know if I can." "So you're not ready, and when you are, you'll know." He stood up, paid for his coffee, and left. And I felt no guilt, because I had learned that giving gold coins to those who cannot appreciate them is not generosity. It's a waste. Chapter 9. The comment that went around. One day, Peyton received a message from an old friend. "Dude, everyone's saying you're being arrogant, that you think you're better than us, that you've forgotten where you came from." Peyton laughed, because years ago that message would have destroyed him. But now he understood. He replied, "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I've just become better than I was. If that bothers you, the problem isn't with me." The response came quickly. "You've changed, man, and not for the better." Peyton turned off his cell phone, because he had learned a simple truth. When you grow, the people who don't grow with you will call you arrogant, because your growth exposes their stagnation, and some people prefer to drag you back down rather than lift you up with them. Peyton had made the hardest choice of his life. He chose to grow up, even if it meant growing up alone. And he had no regrets. Years later, Peyton became a speaker. He taught about personal growth, business, and discipline, and always, someone would raise their hand and ask, "How do you deal with the guilt of leaving people behind?" Peyton smiled, because that was the question he understood best. "I didn't leave anyone behind. They chose to stay, and I respected that choice, but I couldn't sacrifice my own growth for their need for stagnation." There's a concept in psychology called codependency. It's when you define yourself by the act of saving others, when your self-esteem depends on being the savior, and that's dangerous, because you end up needing the people around you to continue needing you. I was codependent. I needed to be the guy who helped everyone because that made me feel important, needed, valuable. But Dr. Sarah taught me something. The greatest act of compassion is sometimes letting someone face the consequences of their own life, because that's the only way a person learns. And you know what I discovered? Some of those friends I left behind. Years later, they reached out to me, not to judge me, but to thank me, because seeing me grow was the inspiration they needed to begin their own journey. I didn't convince anyone with words. I inspired them with actions, and that was only possible because I stopped throwing gold coins to those who couldn't appreciate them. Chapter 10. The Truth About Limits. During one of the lectures, a woman raised her hand. "Peyton, I've been in a relationship for 8 years. My boyfriend doesn't want to grow up, doesn't want to study, doesn't want to build anything, but I love him. What do I do?" Peyton recognized that look. It was the same look he'd had years ago. You can love someone and still not be responsible for that person's life. Love doesn't mean self-annihilation. Love doesn't mean destroying yourself to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. There's a difference between supporting and carrying. Supporting means being beside someone. Carrying means being underneath them. And when you're underneath, you can't grow. You can only bear the weight. The question isn't, do you love him? The question is this love costing you who you could be? The woman started to cry. But what if I break up with him and he falls apart? Then he falls apart, and he learns, or he doesn't learn. But that's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to himself. That was tough, but it was true. Because Peyton had learned the hard way, you can't save anyone, you can only save yourself. And sometimes, saving yourself means letting go of the hand of someone you love. Today, Peyton is 30 years old. He has built a 7-figure company. He travels the world giving lectures. He has a network of friends who grow up together, study together, build together. And do you know what he says when someone asks how he got there? "I stopped trying to save those who didn't want to be saved, and I started saving myself." I learned that there are 3 Japanese concepts that changed my life. The first, Neko Nikoban, don't throw gold coins to those who can't appreciate them. The second, Ma, know when to back off, when to give space, when to let the other person deal with their own consequences. And the third, Mottainai, don't waste your vital energy on those who don't want to grow. These 3 philosophies taught me something that Western psychology calls healthy boundaries. But they're not just boundaries. They're acts of self-preservation. They're choices to prioritize your own growth. And here's the most important thing I've learned. When you stop wasting your energy trying to save those who don't want to be saved, you finally have the energy to build the life you've always wanted. You stop living in the need to be accepted, and you start living in the certainty of who you are. Now I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Is there someone in your life that you try to save every day? Someone you inspire, motivate, advise, but who never changes? Do you feel guilty for wanting to grow because the people around you don't want to grow with you? Have you ever given up on your dreams, your discipline, your potential in order to fit in, to be accepted, to avoid seeming arrogant? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're throwing gold coins to the cats, and you're destroying yourself in the process. And here's the truth. You are not responsible for anyone's life but your own. You can love someone, you can support someone, but you can't want more from that person's life than that person wants from it themselves. And when you finally understand this, when you finally set boundaries, when you finally choose to grow even if it means growing alone, you're going to be called arrogant. You will be judged. You will be criticized. You will lose people. But you'll gain something far more valuable, yourself. Because ultimately, the only person you can truly save is yourself. And that salvation begins when you stop wasting your gold coins on those who don't appreciate them. Neko Nikoban teaches you to recognize when your effort is being wasted. Ma teaches you to know when to step back, when to give space, when to let people deal with their own choices. And Mottainai teaches you not to waste your vital energy